The cleaner froze when she saw her mother's photo in the Millionaire's office. Morning light crept timidly through the windows of the 42nd floor. Claire Dawson tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear as she pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway of Hudson Tower, the tallest corporate building in New York City, at 27. With tired eyes that had seen too much sadness and hands that had worked too hard, she was just another invisible person in the building full of power suits and clicking heels. 3 months into this job, and she still felt the ache in her lower back by noon. But the pay was decent, enough to cover her tiny Brooklyn apartment and help with Grandma Rose's medications. That's what mattered. Today she'd arrived early to clean the executive suite of Richard Hale, CEO of Hale International Hotels. The man himself wasn't due until 9, giving her a solid hour to dust the mahogany shelves, vacuum the plush carpet, and polish the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Manhattan like a steel and glass kingdom. Claire unlocked the double doors with her master key and wheeled her cart inside. The office smelled of expensive leather and that distinct cologne Mr. Hale wore, something woodsy and probably worth more than her weekly paycheck. "Let's get this done," she muttered to herself, slipping on her earbuds and starting her usual routine. The shelves behind his massive desk were crowded with awards, diplomas, and framed photographs. She'd dusted them dozens of times before, barely glancing at the smiling faces of what she assumed were business partners, celebrities who'd stayed at his hotels, maybe family members. But today, something caught her eye. A golden frame, slightly apart from the others. Claire reached for it, cloth in hand, then froze. The photograph slipped from her fingers, clattering back onto the shelf. "No," she whispered, yanking out her earbuds. "No, that's impossible." Her hands trembled as she picked up the frame again. The woman in the photograph wore a sapphire blue dress. Her dark hair swept into an elegant updo, her smile gentle, yet somehow sad around the edges. It was a professional portrait, the kind people paid good money for. It was her mother, Marianne Dawson. Not just any photo of her mother, but that photo, the same one that had hung in their living room, the only professional portrait her mother had ever taken. Wearing that blue dress Claire had memorized in her dreams, the dress she'd been wearing the day she disappeared, 16 years ago. When Claire was just 11, her mother had kissed her forehead, promised to be back soon, and walked out the door. She was going to take care of something important, she'd said. She never came home. Neither did the baby sister Claire's mother had been carrying, little Isabel, who Claire had felt kicking inside her mother's belly for months. Claire's vision blurred with tears. What was her mother's photograph doing in Richard Hale's office? How could he possibly? The door opened behind her. "Excuse me, what are you doing with that?" Claire spun around. Richard Hale stood in the doorway, briefcase in hand, his tall frame imposing in a perfectly tailored gray suit. At 54, his dark hair was graying at the temples, but his presence commanded attention, the kind of man accustomed to people scrambling out of his way. Today, Claire didn't move. "This woman," she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. She turned the frame toward him. "This is my mother." The color drained from Richard's face. The briefcase slipped from his fingers, hitting the floor with a thud. "Your mother," he repeated, as if the words made no sense. "Marianne Dawson," Claire said. "She disappeared 16 years ago. I was 11. Richard gripped the edge of his desk for support, looking like he'd seen a ghost, in a way. Perhaps he had. "That's not possible," he whispered. "Marianne didn't have... She never mentioned a daughter." Claire's eyes narrowed. "How would you know what my mother mentioned or didn't mention?" For a long moment, they stared at each other. The billionaire and the cleaning lady, connected by a photograph neither could explain. "Please," Richard finally said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs across from his desk. "Sit down." Claire hesitated, then sat, still clutching the photograph. Richard didn't take his seat behind the desk. Instead, he lowered himself into the chair beside her, his movements stiff, as if his body had suddenly aged 20 years. "How did you know my mother?" Claire demanded. Richard looked at his hands. "Marianne worked for me, a long time ago, at my first hotel. She was..." He paused, searching for words. "She was the front desk manager." "That's a lie," Claire said flatly. "My mother worked at Henderson Accounting downtown. She was a bookkeeper. Richard shook his head slowly. Before that, she worked for me for almost 2 years. Claire's mind raced. Her mother had changed jobs when Claire was around 8. Could it be possible? What happened to her? Richard asked, his voice hollow. You said she disappeared. The pain Claire had locked away for years cracked open. She left one morning, said she had to take care of something important. She was 8 months pregnant with my sister. Claire's voice broke. They never found her. No body, no trace, nothing. It was like she vanished into thin air. Richard's face contorted. Pregnant. Marianne was pregnant when she disappeared. Claire nodded, watching him carefully. Something wasn't right. His reaction was too raw, too personal for a former employer. What aren't you telling me? She pressed. Richard stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. For a moment, Claire thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Marianne and I, we were in love. The words hung in the air like smoke. That's absurd, Claire said, though her certainty was wavering. She never mentioned you, not once. She wouldn't have, Richard said, turning to face her. It was complicated. I was engaged to someone else, Victoria Langford. Her father was my primary investor, and the marriage was... He waved his hand dismissively. A business arrangement. Claire stood now too, anger rising in her throat. So my mother was what? Your side piece? No. Richard's voice was sharp. It wasn't like that. We were going to leave together. I was going to call off the wedding, but 3 days before we planned to go, she vanished. I searched for her, hired people, but there was nothing, just... He gestured to the photograph that arrived in the mail months later, anonymous, with a note saying, "She won't be coming back, forget her." Claire felt the room spin. This couldn't be happening. This man, this stranger, had known her mother in ways she hadn't, had loved her, apparently, had lost her too. And then a terrible thought struck her. My sister, Claire said slowly. My mother was 8 months pregnant when she disappeared. She said the baby was going to be named Isabel. Richard's eyes widened. If your mother was pregnant when she vanished, that baby, I always thought it was someone else's child, Claire said, the pieces falling into a horrifying new pattern. She never told me who the father was. Richard sat down hard in the chair. If she was pregnant when she disappeared, and we were together until then, his voice was strangled. That baby might have been mine. Before Claire could respond, the office door opened again. A striking woman with ash blonde hair cut in a severe bob entered, wearing a black designer suit and heels that could puncture concrete. Her cold eyes took in the scene. Richard looking shattered, Claire holding the photograph, the cleaning cart abandoned by the shelves. Richard, is everything all right? Her gaze lingered on Claire. Who is this? Claire watched Richard's face shift, composing itself into something more controlled. Victoria, he said carefully. This is one of our cleaning staff. She was just leaving. Victoria Langford Hale, the woman Richard had been engaged to 16 years ago, smiled thinly. I see, well, don't let me interrupt. But her eyes said something else entirely as they fixed on Claire. Something calculating. Something dangerous. Claire placed the photograph on the desk, her hands still trembling. I'll be going now, Mr. Hale. As she pushed her cart toward the door, she heard Victoria's voice, perfectly modulated and utterly cold. Richard, darling, we need to discuss the Singapore acquisition. The doors closed behind Claire, but she could still feel Victoria's eyes boring into her back. Something told her that her discovery had set something terrible in motion, and that after 16 years of wondering, she might finally learn the truth about her mother's disappearance. But at what cost? The moment Claire left his office, Richard collapsed into his chair, his world tilting on its axis. Victoria circled his desk like a shark, her Louboutins clicking against the marble floor. Who was that girl, Richard, really? Her voice was honey-coated steel. Just the cleaning staff, he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Victoria placed her manicured hand on the photograph Claire had left behind. And this? Why was she holding Marianne's picture? Richard's head snapped up. The slip was so casual he almost missed it. How did you know her name was Marianne? A flicker of something, panic, crossed Victoria's face before her practiced smile returned. You've mentioned her before, darling. That girl who worked for you ages ago." She waved dismissively. "The one who left without notice." But Richard remembered clearly now. He'd never spoken Marianne's name to Victoria. Not once in 11 years of marriage. "I need some time alone," he said, reaching for his phone. Victoria hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, I have meetings all afternoon anyway." She leaned down to kiss his cheek, her expensive perfume suffocating him. "Don't forget we have dinner with the Andersons tonight." The moment she left, Richard dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Maxwell Investigations," a gruff voice answered. "James, it's Richard Hale. I need your best man, immediately." Back in her tiny apartment that evening, Claire dumped her uniform in the hamper and collapsed onto her sofa, her mind still reeling. The photograph of her mother, Richard Hale's confession, Victoria's icy stare. The buzzing of her phone startled her. Unknown number. "Miss Dawson, this is Richard Hale. We need to talk. Can you meet tomorrow morning?" Claire stared at the message. How had he gotten her number? Before she could reply, another message appeared. "I've hired an investigator. If what you say is true, and I believe it is, we both deserve answers." Her fingers hovered over the screen. Finally, she typed, "Where and when?" The next morning, Claire found herself in a discreet cafe 10 blocks from Hudson Tower. Richard was already waiting, along with a stocky man with salt and pepper hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Dawson, this is Frank Webster from Maxwell Investigations," Richard said as she slid into the booth. "He's the best private investigator in the city." Webster nodded, his expression neutral. "Mr. Hale has briefed me on the situation. I understand your mother disappeared 16 years ago, pregnant, and was never found." Claire wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "That's right. The police investigation went nowhere. They eventually suggested she'd run away. But you never believed that," Richard said quietly. Claire shook her head. "Never. She wouldn't have abandoned me. Something happened to her." Webster pulled out a notebook. "I'll need everything you can remember about the day she disappeared, and any documents you might have. Police reports, personal effects, anything." For the next hour, Claire recounted the details of that awful day, April 17th, 2009, how Marianne had seemed nervous but excited, how she'd promised to bring back Chinese food for dinner, how Claire had waited by the window until midnight, clutching her stuffed bear, before her grandmother finally called the police. "There's something else," Claire said, hesitating. "My mother was 8 months pregnant. She told me the baby would be my sister. She'd already picked a name, Isabel." Richard's face went ashen. 8 months, he murmured. "The timing. Mr. Hale says you were together until her disappearance," Webster said carefully. Claire looked at Richard. "Is that true?" "Yes," he replied, his voice thick. "We'd been seeing each other for almost a year. I was engaged to Victoria, a business arrangement through our families, but I'd decided to break it off. Marianne and I were planning to leave town together the following week. Then the baby." Claire couldn't finish the sentence. "Could have been mine," Richard completed, meeting her eyes. "I never knew she was pregnant. She never told me." Webster scribbled in his notebook. "We'll need DNA samples from both of you. If we find any trace of your mother or the child, we'll want to confirm relationships." Claire nodded, feeling oddly lightheaded. Could Richard Hale really be her sister's father? "I'll start digging today," Webster continued. "Missing persons reports, hospital records from that time period. Anything that might tell us what happened to Marianne Dawson as they parted ways outside the cafe." Richard hesitated. "Claire, I want you to know." But whatever he was about to say was cut off by his phone ringing. The screen displayed Victoria. His expression hardened as he declined the call. "Be careful," he said instead. "Until we know what happened, it's better if no one knows we're investigating." Claire wasn't scheduled to work at Hudson Tower the next day, but when her phone rang at 8 a.m., it was her supervisor. "Dawson, I'm calling about the Cartier watch." "What Cartier watch?" Claire asked, confusion evident in her voice. "The one reported missing from Mr. Hale's office after your shift yesterday. Security footage shows you were the last person in his office." Claire's blood ran cold. "That's impossible. I didn't take anything." "Mrs. Hale herself filed the report. Security wants to talk to you. Come in immediately, or we'll contact the police." By the time Claire arrived, Victoria was waiting in the security office, perfectly coiffed in a cream-colored suit. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Miss Dawson, how unfortunate. The watch was a 5th anniversary gift from my husband. Quite valuable." "I didn't take any watch," Claire said firmly. "The footage shows you handling items on Mr. Hale's desk," Victoria replied smoothly. "Items you had no business touching." Claire realized with sickening clarity what was happening. This wasn't about a watch. It was about the photograph. "Mrs. Hale, You're terminated, effective immediately," Victoria interrupted. "We won't press charges if you leave quietly and don't return. Hudson Tower has a zero-tolerance policy for theft." Security escorted her out, past the staring eyes of co-workers who'd barely noticed her before. Claire's cheeks burned with humiliation and rage. Victoria had orchestrated this perfectly. Outside, she immediately called Richard, but the call went straight to voicemail. She texted instead, "Your wife just had me fired for stealing a watch I never touched." 3 agonizing hours later, Richard finally replied, "She what? I'm in Tokyo. Just landed for emergency meetings. Call Webster. I'll contact you when I return." Claire's stomach dropped. Richard was halfway around the world, and Victoria had just ensured Claire couldn't set foot in Hudson Tower again. That evening, Claire visited her grandmother's nursing home. At 82, Rose Dawson's body was frail, but her mind remained sharp as ever. "You look troubled, sweetheart," she said, patting the chair beside her bed. Claire hesitated, then told her everything. Finding the photograph, meeting Richard, being fired by Victoria. Rose listened silently, her wrinkled hands clutching Claire's. When the story finished, she sighed deeply. "Wait here," she whispered, before shuffling to her closet. From the back, she pulled out a dusty cardboard box Claire had never seen before. "I've kept these hidden since your mother disappeared," Rose explained, placing the box on Claire's lap. "I never showed them to the police. Something told me. It wasn't safe." Claire opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside were old letters, hospital bills, and a hastily scribbled address. St. Mary's Asylum, Albuquerque. "Mom never mentioned an asylum," Claire said, confused. "She didn't know about it either," Rose replied, her voice barely audible. "The day after she disappeared, a woman called me. She wouldn't identify herself, but she said if I ever wanted to see Marianne alive again, I would destroy these papers and forget about them." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "I was too afraid to do anything. I've carried that guilt for 16 years. Claire stared at the address in disbelief. "You think Mom's been in this asylum all this time?" "I don't know, child," Rose whispered. "But now you have the means to find out," as Claire left the nursing home. Clutching the box to her chest, she didn't notice the black sedan parked across the street, nor did she see the driver take her photograph and make a call. Mrs. Hale, the girl just left with a box of papers, heading home now, inside the luxury penthouse of Hudson Tower. Victoria hung up the phone, her perfectly manicured nails drumming on her desk. Richard was away. The girl was fired. She had time to contain this situation. No one would unravel what she'd buried 16 years ago. No one. Claire stared at her laptop screen, her eyes burning from hours of research. St. Mary's Asylum didn't exist, at least not officially. No website, no public records, nothing on Google Maps. She'd found only a single mention buried in a local Albuquerque newspaper article from 2010 about funding cuts to mental health facilities. A single line. Smaller private institutions like St. Mary's continue to operate outside the public system. Frank Webster hadn't returned her calls. Richard was still in Tokyo, and Victoria had made sure Claire couldn't pay rent next month. She glanced at the small pile of possessions on her coffee table. Her mother's gold locket, a vintage watch from her grandfather, and $300 in cash from her emergency fund. Not nearly enough for a plane ticket to New Mexico, let alone a place to stay once she got there. Her phone pinged with a text message. "Webster here. Sorry for the delay. Ran into some resistance. Someone's watching your apartment. Be careful." Claire froze. Someone was watching her. She resisted the urge to run to the window. Instead, she texted back, "Need to get to Albuquerque. Have a lead on possible asylum where my mother might be." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Tickets and cash waiting at LaGuardia. Terminal B customer service, under name Sarah Johnson. Go now. Don't pack. Buy what you need when you land. Claire's heart raced. Was this real? Could she trust Webster? But what choice did she have? Victoria had effectively cut her off, and every instinct told her that the longer she waited, the more danger her mother might be in. If she was even still alive. 30 minutes later, wearing a baseball cap pulled low over her eyes, Claire slipped out the service entrance of her building. The black sedan Webster had mentioned was parked across the street, but the driver appeared to be scrolling through his phone, not watching the main entrance. She caught the subway to LaGuardia and found her ticket, one way to Albuquerque, departing in 90 minutes, along with an envelope containing $2,000 in cash and a burner phone. A note read, "Call only this number when you land. Mr. H's orders." The desert heat hit Claire like a wall as she exited the Albuquerque airport. May in New Mexico felt nothing like New York. She hailed a cab to a modest motel on the outskirts of town, paid cash for 3 nights, and bought toiletries and a change of clothes at a nearby convenience store. In her room, she called the only number programmed into the burner phone. "You made it," Webster's gruff voice answered. "Good. What's going on?" Claire demanded. "Why all the cloak and dagger? Mrs. Hale fired my agency yesterday, claimed Mr. Hale never authorized the investigation." Webster's voice was tight. "But Mr. Hale contacted me directly from Tokyo, said to help you no matter what. Something's not right with this situation, Miss Dawson." Claire sank onto the bed. "Tell me about it. I did some digging on St. Mary's before I got cut off. It's not on any official records because it's technically not an asylum. It's classified as a private long-term care facility owned by a shell corporation. Very expensive, very secretive. The kind of place wealthy families send relatives they want to forget about." Claire's throat tightened. "How do I get in?" "I've arranged for you to meet a former nurse who worked there until last year. Name's Elena Vasquez. She'll meet you tomorrow at the cafe on Rio Grande Boulevard at 9 a.m. Wear the red scarf I packed with the cash. And if my mother is there, how do I get her out?" Webster's sigh crackled over the line. "One step at a time, Miss Dawson. Find out if she's really there first." The next morning, Claire sat nervously at an outdoor table, the red scarf draped around her neck, despite the warmth. At precisely 9, a petite woman in her 60s approached, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Sarah?" she asked quietly. Claire nodded. Remembering her cover name, Elena Vasquez slid into the seat across from her. "Your friend said you're looking for someone who might be at St. Mary's." "My mother," Claire said, sliding across a photograph, not the professional one from Richard's office, but a casual snapshot of Marianne in their backyard, smiling in the sunshine. "She disappeared 16 years ago. Her name is Marianne Dawson." Elena studied the photo, her expression careful. "St. Mary's doesn't use real names for certain patients." "What do you mean?" The older woman glanced around before leaning forward. "Some patients arrive without documentation, no ID, no family contacts, sometimes with sedatives still in their system. The administration assigns them numbers, not names." Claire felt sick. "Are you saying people are brought there against their will?" "I'm not saying anything officially," Elena replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But in 30 years of nursing, I've never seen a legitimate facility operate the way St. Mary's does. That's why I quit. Can you help me get inside just to look?" Elena hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I still have friends there, but you need to understand something. If your mother has been there all this time, she won't be the same person you remember. Long-term institutionalization, especially with heavy medications." She trailed off. "I understand," Claire said, though she couldn't possibly imagine what her mother might have endured. "Meet me at this address tomorrow morning at 7, Elena said, sliding over a piece of paper. "Wear plain clothes, no jewelry or makeup, and bring cash. We'll need to make a donation to access the visitor areas." St. Mary's Asylum looked nothing like the forbidding Victorian structure Claire had imagined. Instead, it was a low-slung adobe building surrounded by high walls, its windows small and placed high on the walls. It could have been a private school or a small hospital, nestled against the foothills east of Albuquerque. Elena, dressed in her old nurse's uniform, greeted Claire at the service entrance. "I told them you're my niece interested in nursing," she murmured as they signed in at security. "Stay close to me and don't speak unless spoken to." The interior was clinical. White walls, linoleum floors, the distinct smell of disinfectant layered over something medicinal. Nurses and orderlies moved efficiently through the corridors, barely glancing at Claire and Elena. They turned down a quieter hallway marked long-term care ward. Elena nodded to a nurse at the station. "Morning, Rosa. Just showing my niece around." Dr. Mendes approved it. The nurse barely looked up from her charts. "Keep it brief, Elena. Med rounds in 20 minutes. Elena led Claire past a series of closed doors, each with a small window and a number. The silence was eerie, broken only by the occasional soft moan or murmur from behind the doors. "These patients rarely have visitors," Elena whispered. "Most have been here for decades." "How do we find my mother?" Claire asked, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Elena stopped at a computer terminal in an empty nurse's station. "Let me see what I can find." Her fingers moved swiftly over the keyboard, her eyes scanning the screen. "There's no Marianne Dawson in the system. Let me check the Jane does." She scrolled through several entries, then stopped. "Patient 143. Admitted April 18, 2009. No name, no identification. Diagnosis, schizophrenia with dissociative features. April 18, 2009. The day after her mother disappeared. Where is she?" Claire whispered. Elena checked the room assignment. "Room 14, down this hall." "But Claire," she grabbed Claire's arm. "Prepare yourself. 16 years of institutional living. It changes people." Claire nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. They walked down a long white corridor. Room 14 was at the end, its door identical to all the others they'd passed. Elena looked at Claire. "Are you ready?" No, she wasn't ready. How could anyone be ready for this? But Claire nodded anyway. Elena knocked softly, then used her key card to unlock the door. The room was small, with a narrow bed, a nightstand, and a single chair by the window. And there, seated in that chair, staring vacantly out at the mountains, was a thin woman with long, gray-streaked hair. Claire couldn't breathe. The woman looked nothing like the vibrant mother she remembered. This woman was gaunt, her once lustrous hair dull, her skin pale from lack of sunlight, but the profile, the shape of her nose, the curve of her jaw, was hauntingly familiar. "Mom," Claire whispered, her voice breaking. The woman didn't respond, didn't turn from the window. Claire took a step closer, then another, until she stood directly in front of the chair. She knelt down, her hands shaking. "Mom, it's me. It's Claire. Your daughter." Slowly, the woman turned her head. Empty eyes stared through Claire as if she were made of glass, with trembling fingers. Claire reached into her pocket and pulled out the worn photograph of her mother, the same one that had been on Richard's shelf. She held it up. "Mom, it's me, your little girl, Claire." Something flickered in the vacant eyes, a faint spark of recognition. The woman blinked slowly. Her cracked lips parted. A thin, hoarse voice emerged, as if unused for years. Claire." A single tear rolled down the woman's hollow cheek. And Claire Dawson, who had been searching for her mother for 16 years, fell to her knees and wept. Getting Marianne Dawson out of St. Mary's Asylum proved surprisingly easy, and terrifyingly so. After 16 years of being held under a false identity, not a single administrator questioned Elena's fabricated discharge papers. No family was listed in Marianne's records. No one would miss patient 143. "She's essentially a ghost in the system," Elena explained as they wheeled Marianne to a waiting taxi. "That's why these places are so dangerous. Once you're in, it's like you cease to exist." The journey back to New York was a blur. Claire maxed out her credit card for 2 plane tickets. Marianne barely spoke during the flight, her eyes constantly darting around the cabin with a mixture of fear and wonder. 16 years of her life had vanished into the sterile corridors of that facility. The world she was returning to was not the one she had left. By the time they arrived at Claire's Brooklyn apartment, Richard had returned from Tokyo. He met them at the door, his face ashen. "I came as soon as I got your message," he said to Claire. Then his eyes fell on Marianne, and the world seemed to stop. "My God," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Marianne?" She looked at him with confusion, her head tilting slightly. Claire had warned him on the phone. Marianne's memory was fragmented. her mind dulled by years of unnecessary medication. The vibrant woman he had loved existed now only in photographs and memories. Richard fell to his knees before her wheelchair, his composure shattering like glass. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed, taking her thin hands in his. "I should have found you. I should have looked harder." Marianne stared at him, her brow furrowed in concentration. Slowly, she raised a trembling hand to his face. "Richard," she whispered, the name emerging like a long-forgotten melody. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Yes, it's me." Something sparked in her vacant eyes, a glimmer of the woman she had once been. "You have gray now," she said, touching his temple where silver streaked his dark hair. Richard laughed through his tears. "Yes, I've gotten old waiting for you." Claire watched this exchange with a mixture of hope and heartbreak. For 16 years, she had imagined her mother dead or living a new life somewhere. Never this, a shadow existence, her vibrant spirit dimmed to a flicker. "We need to get her to a doctor," Claire said gently. "Someone who can help undo what they did to her." Richard nodded, composing himself. "I've already arranged it, Dr. Sarah Bennett, the best neurologist on the East Coast. She's waiting for us at Mount Sinai," as they helped Marianne back into her wheelchair. Claire caught Richard's eye. "Victoria?" she asked quietly. His jaw tightened. "She thinks I'm at a business meeting. Webster is investigating her now, if she had anything to do with this." He didn't finish the sentence. "He didn't have to, Doctor." Bennett was a tall black woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She spent hours examining Marianne, reviewing the sparse medical records Elena had smuggled out of St. Mary's, and consulting with colleagues. "The good news," she told Claire and Richard in her office later, "is that there's no evidence your mother ever had schizophrenia or any psychotic disorder. The bad news is that she's been on powerful antipsychotics and sedatives for 16 years without medical cause." "Will she recover?" Claire asked, her voice small. Dr. Bennett sighed. "The brain is remarkably resilient, but 16 years is a long time. We'll start by gradually weaning her off these medications. With therapy and proper care, I believe she can regain significant function." "And her memories?" Richard asked. "Some may return, others may be permanently lost, but what she needs most now is stability, safety, and patience." As they left the hospital, Richard turned to Claire. "You both should stay at my penthouse in Soho. Victoria rarely goes there. She prefers our place in the Hudson Tower." Claire hesitated. "I don't think that's a good idea. Not until we know exactly what happened and what Victoria's role was in all this." Richard nodded, his face grim. "You're right. I'll arrange a private apartment with round-the-clock nursing care, and I want you to stay with her. I can't afford to not work." "Richard," he shook his head firmly, "I'll cover everything. It's the least I can do, please, Claire. Let me help take care of her. Of both of you." For 2 weeks, Claire rarely left her mother's side. The luxury apartment Richard had arranged in a discreet building in Chelsea became their sanctuary. Gradually, as the heavy medications left her system, Marianne began to emerge from the fog that had enveloped her for so long. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset over the Hudson River, Marianne spoke more clearly than she had since Claire found her. "They took her," she said suddenly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Claire turned to her, heart racing. "Who, Mom? Who took who?" "My baby, your sister." Marianne's hands moved to her flat stomach, remembering a pregnancy long past. "They took Isabel." Claire gently took her mother's hands. "Do you remember what happened that day, the day you disappeared?" Marianne's eyes clouded, but she nodded slowly. "I was going to meet Richard. We were leaving together." Her voice was stronger now, though still raspy from years of disuse. "I packed a small bag, kissed you goodbye." A tear slid down her hollow cheek. "I promised to bring back Chinese food. What happened after you left our apartment?" Marianne's breathing quickened. "A black car, 2 men. One grabbed me from behind, put something over my mouth. I couldn't scream." Her hand flew to her face as if feeling the phantom cloth. "Then darkness. I woke up in a room. Bright lights, doctors." She was trembling now, lost in the terrible memory. A woman stood at the foot of the bed, blonde, beautiful, cold eyes. Claire felt ice flood her veins. Victoria. Marianne nodded slowly. She said I'd ruined everything, that Richard was hers, that my baby would never, she choked on a sob, would never know its mother. Claire held her mother as she wept, rage building inside her like a gathering storm. Victoria hadn't just ruined her mother's life. She'd stolen 16 years from all of them. Later that night, as Marianne finally slept peacefully with the aid of mild, appropriate medication, Claire called Richard. She's starting to remember, Claire said without preamble. It was Victoria. She had Mom kidnapped, forced her to give birth, then locked her away in that asylum. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Richard, I'm here, he said finally, his voice hollow. Webster found something today. Hospital records from Phoenix, Arizona. A Jane Doe admitted in May 2009. Emergency C-section. Female infant. Healthy. Surrendered for adoption. Claire sank onto the couch. Phoenix, that's where Victoria's family has a vacation home, Richard confirmed grimly. I need to see these records myself. And Claire, the baby, if it was mine. Isabel, Claire whispered. Mom remembers they called her Isabel, the name she had already chosen. Isabel, Richard repeated, the name catching in his throat. My daughter. Webster needs to find those adoption records. He's working on it, but Claire, you need to be careful. Victoria suspects something. She's been asking questions about my meetings, checking my call logs until we have everything in place. You and your mother need to stay completely off the radar. After hanging up, Claire stood at the window looking out at the glittering city. Somewhere out there was her sister, a 16-year-old girl who had no idea she had been stolen from her family before she even took her first breath. A girl who might be Richard Hale's daughter, and somewhere else in that same vast city was Victoria Langford Hale, the woman who had orchestrated it all, the woman who still had everything to lose if the truth came out. Claire's reflection stared back at her from the dark glass, her expression hardening with resolve. Victoria had taken everything from them once. She wouldn't get the chance to do it again. Victoria Langford Hale studied her reflection in the marble bathroom of her Hudson Tower penthouse. At 52, she still turned heads, her ash blonde bob perfectly maintained, her figure slim and toned from thrice-weekly sessions with Manhattan's most exclusive trainer, her face subtly enhanced by the best plastic surgeons money could buy. She was perfect. She had built the perfect life, and now, that cleaning girl threatened to destroy everything. Her phone chimed with a text from her private investigator. Subject M, now living in Chelsea apartment paid for by RH. Nurses coming and going. Subject appears to be receiving medical treatment. Victoria's hand tightened around her phone. So, the girl had actually found Marianne. After all these years, after all the precautions she'd taken. Darling, Richard called from the bedroom. The car will be here in 15 minutes. Just finishing my makeup, she replied, her voice honeyed and smooth despite the rage boiling beneath her skin. She'd been so careful 16 years ago. The plan had been meticulous, executed with surgical precision. After discovering Richard's affair with that front desk girl, finding their love letters, overhearing their plans to run away together, Victoria had made her own arrangements. Her family hadn't built a banking empire by allowing insignificant people to derail their ambitions. 2 men from her father's security team, a private clinic in Phoenix owned by a doctor who owed the Langfords several favors, a convenient mental health facility in New Mexico where difficult relatives could be housed indefinitely. No questions asked. The baby had been the unexpected complication. Victoria hadn't known Marianne was pregnant until the men had brought her to Phoenix. But that, too, had presented an opportunity. The ultimate insurance policy. A child Richard would never know existed. Victoria applied her lipstick with a steady hand. She'd sold the infant to a desperate couple for $200,000 in cash. New identities, new papers, a new life far away from New York. No records, no trace, no possibility of the child ever finding its way back to Richard. She'd married him 2 months later, while he was still drowning in grief and alcohol, had rebuilt his hotel business into an international empire, had given him success, status, power, everything except the one thing he truly wanted, Marianne. And now, 16 years of careful planning was unraveling because a cleaning girl had noticed a photograph. Victoria finished her makeup, slipped into her Louboutins, and joined Richard in their bedroom. He was distant lately, distracted, canceling meetings, disappearing for hours, guarding his phone like it contained state secrets. "You look beautiful," he said automatically, not really looking at her. "Richard," she said, touching his arm. "Is everything all right? You've been so absent lately." He stiffened under her touch. "Just business, Victoria. The Singapore acquisition is more complicated than we anticipated." Lies, she'd checked with their legal team yesterday. The Singapore deal was proceeding smoothly. "Of course, darling." She smiled, letting her hand drop. "Shall we go?" The Whitneys hate when guests are late. Frank Webster had seen a lot in his 30 years as a private investigator. But the web of deception surrounding Marianne Dawson's disappearance was extraordinary, even by his standards. "The money trail is complicated," he explained to Richard and Claire in the secure conference room of his downtown office. "But definitive." He spread documents across the table: bank statements, wire transfers, shell company registrations. 2 days before Marianne disappeared, Victoria withdrew $50,000 from a private account. The money went to this shell corporation. He pointed to a highlighted name, which then paid these 2 men. He slid across photographs of 2 burly men with military haircuts. Ex-military contractors. They've worked for the Langford family for years. Richard stared at the photos, his face ashen. "I recognize them. Victoria's father used them as security consultants when we traveled." 3 days after Marianne disappeared, another $200,000 was withdrawn, Webster continued. This time the money went through 3 different shell companies before ending up here. He pointed to another document. A private adoption agency in Phoenix that lost its license in 2012 for illegal practices. Claire felt sick. "She sold my sister." "It appears so," Webster confirmed grimly. "To a couple named Robert and Laura Carter. They paid cash, received falsified documentation, and took the baby to Boston, Massachusetts." "Boston!" Richard's head snapped up. "They're still there," Webster nodded. "Robert Carter is CEO of Carter Pharmaceuticals. They have a 16-year-old daughter named Isabel." The name hung in the air between them. Isabel, the baby sister Claire had never met. The daughter Richard never knew existed. "I need to see her," Richard whispered. "There's more," Webster said, pulling out another file. "I tracked down one of the men who took Marianne, guy named Marcus Jensen. He's doing time for armed robbery in Pennsylvania. Says he'll talk in exchange for help with his parole hearing." "Whatever he wants," Richard said immediately. "Set it up." As they left Webster's office, Claire finally asked the question that had been burning inside her for weeks. "What are you going to do about Victoria?" Richard's face hardened, a coldness settling over his features that Claire had never seen before. "First, we get everything in order, every piece of evidence, every witness, every document, then..." He looked at her, his eyes glacial. "Then I destroy her, just as she tried to destroy your mother." Victoria knew something was wrong the moment she entered the penthouse. Richard's briefcase was on the sofa, his suit jacket thrown carelessly beside it. He never left his things out like that. "Richard," she called, setting down her shopping bags. "Are you home early?" She found him in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. "You had her kidnapped," he said. Without turning around, the world seemed to stop. Victoria carefully closed the study door behind her. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied smoothly. 16 years ago, Richard continued as if she hadn't spoken. "You hired men to abduct Marianne Dawson. You had her taken to Phoenix, where she was forced to give birth. Then you had her committed to a mental institution under a false identity." Victoria's mind raced, calculating options, exits, contingencies. "Richard, darling, you're not making sense. Who's been filling your head with these ridiculous stories?" He turned then, and the look in his eyes made her take an involuntary step back. "She had a daughter," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "An 11-year-old girl who waited by the window all night for her mother to come home. A girl who grew up believing her mother had abandoned her. That cleaning girl," Victoria realized aloud. "She's Marianne's daughter." Richard's laugh was hollow. "Yes, Victoria, Claire Dawson, the woman you had fired for a theft that never happened. The woman who found her mother locked away in that asylum where you buried her." Victoria's perfectly maintained composure began to crack. "You don't understand. She was going to ruin everything. You were going to leave." I loved her. Richard slammed his glass down. And she was pregnant with my child. A child you never knew existed. Victoria shot back, abandoning pretense. A child I made sure would never come between us. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria realized her mistake too late. So it's true, Richard whispered. All of it. You admit it. Victoria straightened, her survival instincts kicking in. You can't prove anything. It's her word against mine. A cleaning girl and a mentally ill woman who's been institutionalized for 16 years. Against me, the Victoria Langford Hale. She laughed bitterly. Good luck with that, Richard. We found Marcus Jensen, Richard said quietly. He's prepared to testify about who hired him to kidnap Marianne. The color drained from Victoria's face. We found the money trail, Victoria. The payments to Jensen and his partner, the payments to the clinic in Phoenix, the sale. His voice broke. The sale of my daughter to the Carters in Boston. Victoria's mind spun frantically. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when she had everything. Richard. She tried again, switching tactics, moving toward him with the grace that had always captivated him. Whatever you think happened, you need to consider what's at stake. Our company, our reputation. Think about what this kind of scandal would do to stock prices, to our standing in the community. Do you think I care about any of that? Richard's voice was ice. You stole 16 years from Marianne. You sold my child. There is nothing. You can say that will make this right. Victoria's face hardened. The beautiful mask slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Fine. If that's how you want to play this, remember that I control 40% of Hale International's stock. My family's investments built your empire. You expose me, you lose everything. You think I won't burn it all down to get justice for them? Richard asked quietly. For the first time, Victoria felt real fear. The man before her was not the grieving, manipulable Richard she had married. This was someone else entirely. Someone dangerous. This isn't over, she said, gathering her purse. You'll regret this. Richard, no one walks away from me. As the elevator doors closed behind Victoria, she pulled out her phone. She had contingency plans. She always had contingency plans. And Claire Dawson, that girl had no idea who she was dealing with. The Carter residence in Boston's exclusive Beacon Hill neighborhood stood like a fortress of old money and privilege, a 4-story brownstone with gleaming windows and a glossy black door adorned with a tasteful brass knocker. Richard stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the house where his daughter had grown up without him. Are you ready for this? Claire asked, standing beside him in the crisp May afternoon. He shook his head. Not even remotely, after the confrontation with Victoria 3 days earlier. Events had moved quickly. Victoria had vacated their Hudson Tower penthouse, retreating to the Langford family estate in Connecticut. Richard's security team reported she'd been making dozens of calls to attorneys and financial advisors. She was preparing for war. Meanwhile, Webster had arranged this meeting with the Carters. One phone call mentioning irregularities with your daughter's adoption and DNA evidence had been enough to secure an immediate appointment. What if she hates me? Richard asked quietly as they approached the front steps. Claire squeezed his arm. She doesn't even know you yet. The door opened before they could knock, revealing a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and rimless glasses. Robert Carter's expression was guarded, his posture rigid with tension. Mr. Hale, he said stiffly. Please come in. The interior was exactly what Richard would have expected. Tasteful antiques, original artwork, Persian rugs over hardwood floors, a shrine to understated wealth. Laura Carter waited in the living room, perched on the edge of a silk sofa as if prepared to flee at any moment. She was a slim woman with carefully highlighted blonde hair and anxious eyes. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Richard began after introductions were made. I understand this must be difficult. Robert Carter's jaw tightened. You're claiming our daughter was illegally adopted, that she's biologically yours. I'd call that considerably more than difficult, Mr. Hale. I'm not here to disrupt your family, Richard said carefully, but certain facts have recently come to light that I believe you should be aware of. Over the next 20 minutes, Richard and Claire explained the situation. Marianne's disappearance, her recent discovery, Victoria's involvement. and the evidence pointing to the sale of the infant to the Carters. As they spoke, Laura Carter's face grew increasingly pale. When Richard finished, she exchanged a look with her husband. "We didn't know," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "about the kidnapping, about the woman being held against her will. We were told the mother was a young college student who wanted a closed adoption. The agency assured us everything was legal," Robert added, though his voice lacked conviction. "We paid a substantial fee, in cash. They said it was to expedite the process. $200,000, Richard said flatly. Laura flinched. Robert's face reddened. "We had been trying for a baby for 8 years, Laura said, tears welling in her eyes. 3 miscarriages, 2 failed IVF cycles. When they called about a newborn girl available immediately," she trailed off, twisting her hands in her lap. "I'm not here to judge you," Richard said, his voice softening. "But I would like to meet my daughter, if DNA confirms what we already suspect." Robert Carter stiffened. "And if she is biologically your child, what then?" "She's 16 years old, Mr. Hale. She's been our daughter her entire life." Before Richard could respond, the front door opened and closed with a bang. "Mom, Dad, you will not believe what Zach said about prom." The voice cut off abruptly as a teenage girl appeared in the doorway. She wore a private school uniform, pleated skirt, blazer with an embroidered crest, white button-down shirt. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and her eyes, a striking shade of blue-gray, widened as she took in the unexpected visitors. "Oh, sorry, I didn't know we had company." Richard couldn't breathe. The girl standing before him was the spitting image of Marianne at that age. The same delicate features, the same graceful posture, even the same slight tilt of her head when she was curious. But the eyes, those were his eyes, staring back at him from a face that combined his features with Marianne's in a genetic masterpiece. "Isabel," Laura said, her voice strained. This is Mr. Hale and Ms. Dawson. They're here to discuss something important with us." Isabel's gaze swept over them, lingering on Claire with a flicker of recognition. "Have we met before? You look familiar." Claire smiled tremulously. "No, we haven't met, but I've been looking for you for a very long time." Explaining the situation to Isabel was even more difficult than Richard had anticipated. The Carters insisted on being present, with Robert frequently interjecting to emphasize that regardless of biology, they were Isabel's parents. The girl herself sat in stunned silence as the story unfolded. The affair, the planned elopement, the kidnapping, the 16 years of separation. "So you're saying," she said finally, looking at Claire, "that you're my sister, and you," turning to Richard, "are my biological father." Richard nodded, unable to trust his voice. "And my biological mother is alive. After all this time." "Yes," Claire said gently. "She's recovering in New York. She was kept sedated for many years, but she's getting better. She remembers you." Isabel stood abruptly and walked to the window, her back to the room. "This is insane. My whole life is a lie." "No, sweetheart," Laura said quickly. "We're still your parents. We raised you. We love you. But you bought me." Isabel spun around, eyes blazing. Like some black market handbag. You paid cash for a stolen baby." Robert flinched. "Isabel, it wasn't like that. We didn't know. How could you not know? Who pays $200,000 in cash for a legal adoption?" Tears streamed down her face now. "Did you ever even question it? Or did you just not want to know?" The painful truth hung in the air between them. The Carters had suspected something wasn't right about Isabel's adoption, but their desperation for a child had overridden their better judgment. "I want a DNA test," Isabel said firmly, wiping away tears. "I want to know for sure." Richard pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I brought test kits if you're willing." Isabel nodded, then turned to Claire. "And I want to meet her, my biological mother." "Of course," Claire said softly. "Whenever you're ready." "Isabel," Laura began, her voice pleading, "please don't make any hasty decisions. We should talk about this as a family first." "A family built on lies," Isabel muttered, but her expression softened as she saw her mother's tears. Despite everything, these were the only parents she had ever known. "I'm not going anywhere right now," she said more gently. I need to know the truth. All of it." 3 days later, Richard's phone rang with the DNA results. He answered on speaker, Claire and Marianne beside him in the Chelsea apartment. "The results show a 99.9% probability that you are the biological father of Isabel Carter," the lab technician confirmed. Though they had all expected this result, hearing it stated so definitively sent a wave of emotion through the room. Richard closed his eyes. Overcome, Claire squeezed her mother's hand as tears slipped down Marianne's hollow cheeks. "She wants to meet you," Claire told her mother after the call ended. "She's coming to New York this weekend." Marianne nodded, touching the photograph of baby Isabel that Claire had printed from the Carters' social media accounts. "My baby," she whispered, "all grown up." Richard watched this exchange with a heart both full and breaking. The joy of finding his daughter was tempered by the knowledge of all they had lost. 16 years of birthdays, first steps, school plays, bedtime stories, time that could never be reclaimed. His phone buzzed with a text message from Webster, one of the kidnappers willing to testify. Full confession recorded. Also found Victoria's offshore accounts. "She's been moving money since your confrontation. Building our case. Call me." Richard showed the message to Claire, whose expression hardened with determination. "We're getting closer," she said. "Victoria won't escape justice this time." As if summoned by her name, Richard's phone rang again. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. "Richard." Her voice was ice when he answered. "My attorneys tell me you've been in Boston, meeting with some family named Carter." She paused, her tone shifting to something almost amused. "Did you really think I wouldn't have contingency plans? That I wouldn't protect myself?" "It's over, Victoria," Richard said flatly. "We have everything. The money trail, witnesses, DNA confirmation." "You have nothing," she hissed. "And if you pursue this, I'll make sure you lose everything. Not just the company, Richard. Everything." The threat hung between them, cold and venomous. "You've already taken everything that mattered," Richard replied quietly. "There's nothing left for you to take." He ended the call. Turning back to Claire and Marianne, despite Victoria's threats, for the first time in 16 years, hope glimmered on the horizon. His daughter was coming home. The morning Isabel Carter was scheduled to arrive in New York, Marianne Dawson woke before dawn. Claire found her mother sitting by the window of the Chelsea apartment, her thin fingers nervously smoothing the fabric of her new dress, a simple blue wrap dress they'd chosen together during a rare excursion outside. "Do you think she'll like me?" Marianne asked, her voice stronger now after weeks of proper treatment, but still carrying the hesitancy of someone unused to being heard. Claire sat beside her, taking her mother's cold hands. "She'll love you, Mom." But Claire understood her mother's fear in the 3 weeks since they'd returned from Albuquerque. Marianne had made remarkable progress. The fog of medications had cleared, revealing glimpses of the vibrant woman Claire remembered from childhood. Still, 16 years of institutional living had left their mark. Marianne startled at loud noises, became overwhelmed in crowded spaces, and sometimes lost her train of thought mid-sentence. Dr. Bennett had warned them recovery would be a long road. "The mind protects itself from trauma," she'd explained. "Some memories may never fully return, and that might be a blessing." The doorbell rang at precisely 10 o'clock. Claire squeezed her mother's shoulder before going to answer it. Richard stood in the hallway, looking simultaneously elated and terrified. Beside him, shifting nervously from foot to foot, was Isabel. In person, the resemblance to a young Marianne was even more striking than in photographs. The same heart-shaped face, the same graceful posture. But Richard's influence was evident too. The determined set of her jaw, the analytical gaze that assessed Claire as they greeted each other. "Where is she?" Isabel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Claire led her into the living room where Marianne waited, now standing, her thin frame trembling slightly. For a long moment, mother and daughter simply stared at each other across 16 years of absence. Then Marianne opened her arms, and Isabel crossed the room in 3 quick strides, collapsing into an embrace that contained all the words neither of them could find. Frank Webster spread dozens of documents across the conference table in Richard's downtown office, folders of bank statements, medical records, adoption papers, and transcripts of interviews conducted over the past month. Marcus Jensen's testimony is the linchpin, Webster explained, tapping a thick file. He's given us everything: names, dates, locations. Confirms Victoria hired him and his partner directly to abduct Marianne. Says Victoria personally supervised the transfer to the clinic in Phoenix. Richard studied the transcript of Jensen's confession, his expression darkening. He says Victoria visited the clinic while Marianne was in labor. Webster nodded grimly. Jensen claims Victoria wanted to ensure no one connected the dots. She personally arranged for the falsified medical records and the transfer to St. Mary's after the birth. Claire, who had joined them after leaving Isabel and Marianne getting acquainted, felt physically ill reading Jensen's clinical description of her mother's ordeal. "And the money trail?" she asked, forcing herself to focus on the evidence rather than the horrors it revealed. Webster opened his laptop, displaying a complex diagram of financial transactions. Victoria wasn't as careful as she thought. The initial payments to Jensen and his partner came from an account in her maiden name. We've traced similar payments to the clinic director and to an administrator at St. Mary's, regular deposits every 6 months for 16 years. "Hush money," Richard said flatly. "Exactly, and here's where it gets interesting." Webster pulled up another screen showing a series of transfers. 3 days after your confrontation with Victoria, she began liquidating assets and moving money offshore, nearly $20 million so far. Classic pre-flight behavior. Richard's eyebrows shot up. "You think she's planning to run?" "I think she's preparing for every contingency," Webster replied, "including the possibility that she might need to leave the country quickly." Claire studied the financial records with growing anger. "All these years, she was living in luxury while my mother was drugged in that horrible place. Victoria will face justice," Richard promised, his voice hard. "For what she did to your mother, to you, to Isabel, to all of us." Webster closed his laptop. "We've compiled everything for the district attorney. Kidnapping, false imprisonment, illegal adoption, fraud, money laundering. The charges will be extensive." "When do we move?" Richard asked. "That's up to you," Webster replied. "But once we present this evidence to the authorities, there's no turning back. Victoria will know we're coming for her." Richard's phone buzzed with a text. He smiled slightly as he read it. "Isabel wants to come by the office. Says she and Marianne would like to see where I work." Claire nodded. "Mom seemed comfortable with her. They've been looking at old photographs I saved. We'll present the evidence tomorrow," Richard decided, standing. "Today belongs to our family." The reunion at Richard's office was both joyful and awkward. Isabel moved between her newfound parents with curious grace, asking questions about their past, studying their features for similarities to her own. "Did you know?" she asked Richard as they stood looking out at the Manhattan skyline. "About me, I mean. Before all this happened." Richard shook his head sadly. "Your mother disappeared before she could tell me she was pregnant. If I had known." "You would have looked harder," Isabel finished for him. "I would have torn the world apart," Richard corrected, his voice fierce. Isabel nodded, seeming to accept this. "The Carters, my adoptive parents, they're devastated. Especially my mom, Laura." She stumbled over what to call the woman who had raised her. "They've been crying a lot, Dad. Robert keeps saying they didn't know." But you think they suspected something wasn't right?" Claire supplied. Isabel nodded again. $200,000 in cash for a rush adoption with no questions asked. They're not stupid people, they just wanted a baby so badly they didn't look too closely. "Do you blame them?" Marianne asked softly from where she sat on the office sofa. Isabel considered this. "I'm angry they didn't ask more questions. But they've been good parents. They loved me. That part wasn't a lie." The conversation was interrupted by Richard's assistant knocking urgently at the door. "Mr. Hale, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mrs. Hale is on her way up. She's insisting on seeing you immediately." Richard's face hardened. "Take Marianne and Isabel to the executive lounge," he instructed Claire quickly. "I'll handle Victoria." But it was too late. The office door burst open, and Victoria Langford Hale swept in, resplendent in a cream-colored suit, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed. She stopped short at the tableau before her. Richard, Claire, Marianne, and a teenage girl who could only be Isabel. For a moment, Genuine shock registered on Victoria's carefully maintained face. Then her expression morphed into a cold, calculating smile. "Well," she said silkily, "what a charming family reunion." "Victoria." Richard stepped forward, positioning himself between her and the others. "This is a private meeting." Victoria ignored him, her gaze fixed on Isabel. "So you're the baby, all grown up now, I see. You have your mother's face." Her eyes slid to Marianne, who had shrunk back against the sofa. "Though she hasn't aged quite as well, has she? Get out." Richard's voice was deadly quiet. "Now," Victoria laughed, a brittle sound with no humor in it. "Or what? Richard, you'll call security on your wife, create a scene the board will love to hear about." "You're not my wife," Richard replied coldly. "Not after what you've done." Victoria's smile never wavered as she opened her designer handbag and extracted a manila envelope, tossing it onto Richard's desk. "Divorce papers," she announced. "My attorneys have been working overtime. 50% of everything, Richard. That's my price for a quick, quiet dissolution of our marriage." "You'll get nothing," Richard said flatly. "Except perhaps a prison cell." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Don't threaten me, Richard. I've built contingency plans you can't begin to imagine." It was Claire who stepped forward now, her anger finally boiling over. "Is that what you call kidnapping my pregnant mother? Selling a newborn baby? Locking an innocent woman away for 16 years? Contingency plans?" Victoria regarded Claire with the dismissive glance one might give an insect. "You have no idea what you're talking about, little girl. We have everything," Claire continued, trembling with rage. "The money trail, the witnesses. Marcus Jensen has given a full confession." For the first time, Victoria's composure slipped. "Jensen is a convicted felon. His word means nothing. His word, plus the banking records, plus the testimony from the clinic staff we've located, plus the administrator from St. Mary's who's agreed to testify in exchange for immunity," Richard countered. "It's over, Victoria. The DA is getting everything tomorrow morning." Victoria's face drained of color, but she recovered quickly. "You wouldn't dare. Think of the scandal, Richard. Think of your precious company. The stock will plummet when this gets out." "Some things are more important than money," Richard replied, glancing at Marianne, Claire, and Isabel. "Some things are worth any price." Victoria's eyes turned to ice. She snatched back the divorce papers and strode to the door, pausing only to deliver a final venomous promise. "This isn't over, Richard. Not by a long shot." As the door slammed behind her, Isabel let out a shaky breath. "So that's the woman who stole me from my family." Claire put an arm around her newly discovered sister. "That's her. But she won't hurt any of us ever again." Isabel nodded, her expression hardening with a determination that mirrored Richard's. "I want to testify," she said firmly. "Against her. I want to help put her away for what she did." Richard looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. "It won't be easy. Nothing about this is easy," Isabel replied. "But it's right." As they left the office together, Richard, Marianne, Claire, and Isabel, something shifted between them. They were no longer four individuals connected by a shared trauma. They were becoming, against all odds, a family. The boardroom of Hale International Hotels buzzed with tension. Shareholders and executives murmured among themselves, stealing glances at Richard, who stood stoically at the head of the polished table. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittered in the late afternoon sun, oblivious to the drama unfolding 42 stories above its streets. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, his voice commanding immediate silence. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. I've called this emergency meeting because there are matters of grave importance that affect the future of this company." Victoria sat across the room, flanked by her attorneys. Her face betrayed nothing, though her manicured nails dug into the leather portfolio before her. She hadn't expected Richard to move so quickly. The meeting had been called just hours after their confrontation in his office. "Before we begin," one of Victoria's lawyers interjected, "I must remind everyone that any unsubstantiated allegations against Mrs. Hale could constitute slander, with serious legal consequences." Richard smiled thinly. "Nothing I'm about to share is unsubstantiated, counselor." At the back of the room, Claire sat beside Frank Webster, both ready with their evidence. Marianne had remained at the apartment with Isabel. neither woman ready for this particular battleground. Richard pressed a button, and a screen descended from the ceiling. 16 years ago, he began. A woman named Marianne Dawson disappeared. She was 8 months pregnant at the time. Photographs appeared on the screen. Marianne as she had been, young and vibrant, alongside recent photos of her current, haunted state. She was my executive assistant, Richard continued, deliberately altering the nature of their relationship for the business audience. We were close friends when she vanished without a trace. I was devastated. Police investigations went nowhere. It was as if she had simply ceased to exist. Victoria shifted in her seat, her expression carefully neutral. 3 weeks ago, Marianne Dawson was found alive. Richard's voice hardened. For 16 years, she had been held against her will in a private mental institution in New Mexico, under a false identity, drugged into near catatonia. Gasps rippled through the boardroom. That's a fantastic story, Richard. Victoria cut in smoothly. But what does an unfortunate mental health situation have to do with Hale International? Richard turned his gaze directly to her. I'm getting to that, Victoria. He clicked to the next slide. Bank statements, highlighted transfers, dates circled in red. 2 days before Marianne's disappearance, $50,000 was withdrawn from a private account. He pointed to the name on the statement. Victoria Langford's personal account. The money was then transferred through a shell corporation to these two men. Photographs of Marcus Jensen and his partner appeared on the screen. Ex-military contractors who worked for the Langford family. Richard continued relentlessly. Men who have now provided sworn affidavits confirming they were hired by Victoria to abduct Marianne Dawson. Victoria stood abruptly. This is absurd. Richard is clearly suffering some kind of breakdown. These allegations are completely false. Sit down. Victoria, Richard said quietly. We're just getting started. The evidence unfolded methodically over the next 30 minutes. Bank records showing regular payments to St. Mary's Asylum. The medical records from the Phoenix clinic where Marianne had been forced to give birth. The falsified adoption papers for the infant girl. Throughout the presentation, the boardroom grew increasingly still, the atmosphere thick with shock and disbelief. The baby, Richard said, his voice catching slightly. My biological daughter was sold for $200,000 to a couple in Boston. She was raised without any knowledge of her true parentage until 3 days ago, when DNA testing confirmed I am her father. Victoria's attorney leapt to his feet. This is outrageous. There's no evidence connecting Mrs. Hale to these alleged events. Webster stood, moving to the front of the room with a slim folder. Actually, there is. He slid the folder toward the corporate counsel. This is a sworn confession from Marcus Jensen, currently serving time for armed robbery in Pennsylvania. He details precisely how Mrs. Hale orchestrated the kidnapping, the forced birth, and the illegal adoption. The corporate counsel, a silver-haired woman with shrewd eyes, scanned the document rapidly. Her expression grew increasingly grave as she turned each page. Mr. Jensen is a convicted felon, Victoria snapped. His word means nothing. Perhaps, Webster acknowledged, but his word, combined with the banking records, the medical files, and this, he produced a small digital recorder, means quite a lot. He pressed play. Jensen's gravelly voice filled the room. It was Victoria Langford who hired us, paid cash up front, half on delivery, said the woman was causing problems for her fiancé's business, needed her to disappear for a while. A pause then. When we grabbed her, we didn't know she was pregnant. Called Miss Langford to ask what to do. She said to continue as planned. Take her to the clinic in Phoenix. She met us there, supervised the whole thing herself, told us, this baby will never see its mother again. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's face had turned ashen. That recording is fake. It's been doctored. The FBI's forensic audio team has already authenticated it, Webster replied calmly, just as they've authenticated the recording from Dr. Kelvin at the Phoenix clinic, detailing how you personally arranged for Marianne's transfer to St. Mary's after she gave birth. For the first time, panic flashed across Victoria's perfect features. Her eyes darted around the room, finding no allies among the shocked faces of the board members. You've been making wire transfers to offshore accounts since our confrontation last week, Richard continued, displaying more banking records. $23 million, moving through various shell companies before landing in a Cayman Islands account. Classic pre-flight behavior, according to the federal investigators who are now tracking these transactions. Federal investigators. Victoria's voice had lost its usual silky confidence. Richard nodded. The FBI has been brought in due to the interstate nature of the crimes. Kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, human trafficking, fraud, money laundering. The list goes on. One of the board members, a distinguished older gentleman, cleared his throat. Richard, these are extremely serious allegations. If even half of this is true, all of it is true, Claire said, speaking for the first time as she stepped forward. I'm Claire Dawson, Marianne's daughter. I was 11 when my mother disappeared. I grew up believing she had abandoned me. She met Victoria's gaze across the room. Instead, she was being held prisoner while I was placed in foster care. My sister was sold like property. Our family was destroyed. Victoria's composure finally cracked. You have no idea what was at stake, she hissed. He was going to leave everything. Leave me. For that nobody. The room went perfectly still as everyone absorbed the inadvertent confession. Victoria seemed to realize her mistake immediately. I didn't. That's not what I meant. I think it's exactly what you meant, Richard said quietly. You couldn't bear to lose control, so you destroyed lives to maintain it. Victoria's attorney whispered urgently in her ear, but she brushed him off, desperation now evident in her voice. Richard, be reasonable. Think about what this will do to the company, to our reputation. The scandal alone could sink stock prices by 30%. She gestured around the boardroom. Everyone here will lose millions. Is that what you want? What I want, Richard replied, his voice ice, is justice for the woman who spent 16 years drugged into oblivion because of your jealousy. What I want is to know my daughter, who grew up without her biological parents because of your greed. What I want is for Claire to have her mother back, her family restored. He turned to the board members. I understand this will impact the company. I'm prepared to buy back shares at current market value from anyone who wishes to divest before the storm hits. But I will not, cannot, keep this buried any longer. The corporate counsel stood, addressing Victoria directly. Mrs. Hale, in light of these allegations and the evidence presented, I must advise the board to immediately suspend you from all company operations pending a full investigation. You can't do that, Victoria snapped. I own 40% of this company. Shares which are now frozen, Webster interjected, by federal court order as part of the criminal investigation. As if on cue, the boardroom doors opened. 2 FBI agents in dark suits entered, accompanied by NYPD officers. Victoria Langford Hale, one agent asked, though it was clearly a formality. Yes, she answered automatically, still seeming unable to process what was happening. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, false imprisonment, human trafficking, and fraud, he began reciting her Miranda rights as the officers moved forward with handcuffs. This is a mistake, Victoria said, backing away. Richard, tell them this is a mistake. But Richard simply watched, his face impassive, as the woman who had stolen 16 years from the people he loved was led away in handcuffs. As the boardroom emptied, Claire approached Richard, slipping her hand into his. It's really over, she said softly. Richard squeezed her hand, his eyes fixed on the door through which Victoria had just been escorted. No, he replied quietly. Now we can finally begin. The courthouse steps swarmed with reporters, their microphones thrust forward like spears, cameras flashing in a relentless strobe. Claire gripped her mother's arm tightly as they navigated the gauntlet. Behind them, Richard guided Isabel through the crowd, his hand protectively on her shoulder. Ms. Dawson, how does it feel confronting the woman who destroyed your family? Mr. Hale, will you be seeking full custody of your biological daughter? Isabel, are you changing your name from Carter to Hale? The questions bombarded them from all sides, each more invasive than the last. 3 months had passed since Victoria's arrest, and the story had exploded across national media. The hotel mogul's wife, who kidnapped her rival, sold a baby, and imprisoned a woman for 16 years. It was the kind of salacious tale that dominated cable news cycles and magazine covers. No comments until after the hearing, Richard's attorney announced firmly as they reached the courthouse doors. Inside the marble hallway, they paused to catch their breath. Marianne looked pale but determined. The past months of proper medical treatment and therapy had worked wonders. Her posture was straighter, her gaze clearer, her voice stronger. Still, crowds triggered her anxiety, a lingering effect of her long isolation. "Are you okay, Mom?" Claire asked gently. Marianne nodded, squeezing her daughter's hand. "I need to do this for both of you." Her eyes moved between Claire and Isabel. "For all of us." The courtroom was already packed when they entered. Victoria sat at the defense table, immaculately dressed in a conservative navy suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a simple chignon. She looked more like a CEO heading into a board meeting than a defendant facing multiple felony charges. The preliminary hearings had dragged on for weeks as Victoria's high-powered legal team filed motion after motion to suppress evidence, dismiss charges, and delay proceedings. But the prosecution's case was solid, the paper trail Webster had uncovered, combined with Jensen's testimony and the medical records from St. Mary's, had withstood every challenge. Today's hearing would determine if the case would proceed to trial, or if Victoria would accept a plea deal. The district attorney had offered 25 years in exchange for guilty pleas on the most serious charges. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Harriman entered the courtroom. The proceedings began with the typical formalities: case numbers, appearances, procedural matters. Through it all, Victoria sat perfectly still, her expression revealing nothing. Not once did she turn to look at the family she had torn apart. Finally, the district attorney rose. "Your Honor, the state calls Marianne Dawson." A murmur rippled through the courtroom as Marianne made her way to the witness stand, under the gentle questioning of the prosecutor. She recounted her relationship with Richard, her pregnancy, and the last day she remembered before waking up in the Phoenix clinic. "He put something over my mouth," she testified, her voice steady despite the painful memories. "A cloth with a chemical smell. When I woke up, I was strapped to a hospital bed. A woman was standing over me." "Can you identify that woman?" the prosecutor asked. Marianne's gaze shifted to the defense table. "Yes, it was her, Victoria Langford." "And what did the defendant say to you?" "She said I had ruined everything." Marianne's voice wavered slightly. "That Richard belonged to her, that my baby would never know me." As Marianne continued her testimony, describing the forced labor, the glimpse she had of her newborn daughter before the baby was taken away, and the years of drugged confinement at St. Mary's, the courtroom fell into a horrified silence. Even the most seasoned reporters scribbled notes with stunned expressions. Victoria's attorney attempted to undermine Marianne's testimony during cross-examination, suggesting her memory was compromised by years of medication, that her recollection couldn't be trusted. But Marianne remained calm, answering each question with quiet dignity. "Mrs. Dawson," the defense attorney pressed, "isn't it possible that you checked yourself into St. Mary's voluntarily, that your condition required institutional care?" "No," Marianne replied simply. "I was a healthy woman with a daughter at home and another on the way. I had a life I loved and people who loved me. I would never have abandoned them." When Claire took the stand next, she described the devastation of losing her mother, the years of uncertainty and grief. "I was 11 years old," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I waited by the window all night, certain she'd come home. She'd promised to bring Chinese food for dinner." Claire paused, collecting herself. "I spent the next 16 years believing she had abandoned me, that I wasn't enough for her to stay." Victoria remained stone-faced throughout Claire's testimony, but Richard, seated in the gallery, wiped tears from his eyes. The most dramatic testimony came from Marcus Jensen, brought to court from prison in Pennsylvania. The burly ex-soldier described in clinical detail how he and his partner had abducted Marianne on Victoria's orders, how they had transported her across state lines to the private clinic in Phoenix, how Victoria had personally overseen the operation. "She was real specific about what should happen after the baby was born," Jensen testified. "Said the woman was to be taken to St. Mary's, registered as a Jane Doe with a schizophrenia diagnosis. Said to make sure she was kept sedated. Her exact words were, 'I want her to disappear into the system.'" Victoria's attorney objected repeatedly, questioning Jensen's credibility given his criminal record, but the prosecution countered with bank records showing payments from Victoria's accounts to Jensen, corroborating every detail of his testimony. By the time Richard took the stand, the courtroom was tense with anticipation. As one of New York's most prominent businessmen, his public testimony about such private matters had drawn even more media attention to the case. "I met Marianne when she worked at my first hotel," Richard testified. "We fell in love, despite my engagement to Victoria. It was wrong of me to lead a double life, and I take full responsibility for that moral failing." He described how he had planned to break off his engagement, how he and Marianne had planned to leave New York together, 3 days before we were supposed to go. "She vanished," Richard said. "I hired private investigators, filed police reports, searched for months. Eventually, I received an anonymous note with her photograph, saying she wouldn't return and that I should forget her." "And what did you do then?" the prosecutor asked. Richard's expression hardened. "I believed she had left me. In my grief, I turned to alcohol. Victoria was there, supportive, understanding. 2 months later, we married, just as her father had always planned." "Did you ever suspect Mrs. Langford's involvement in Marianne's disappearance?" "Never," Richard admitted, the word heavy with regret. "Not until Claire Dawson found her mother's photograph in my office 3 months ago. The day's final witness was Isabel. At 16, she needed special permission from both her adoptive parents and the judge to testify." Robert and Laura Carter sat in the back of the courtroom, their faces drawn with shame and grief. As their daughter took the stand, Isabel spoke with remarkable composure about learning her true identity, meeting her biological parents, and coming to terms with the circumstances of her adoption. "The Carters raised me with love," she testified. "I don't doubt that, but my life, my entire existence, was built on a crime. I was stolen from my mother's arms and sold like property." She looked directly at Victoria for the first time, and the woman responsible has shown no remorse, no recognition of the lives she destroyed. As the day's proceedings concluded, the judge called the attorneys to the bench for a private conference. When they returned to their tables, Victoria's attorney leaned close, whispering urgently in her ear. For the first time, Victoria's perfect mask slipped, revealing a flash of fear. After a tense moment, she nodded curtly. Her attorney turned to address the court. "Your Honor, in light of today's testimony, Mrs. Langford Hale wishes to change her plea." A ripple of shocked murmurs spread through the courtroom. "My client will plead guilty to all charges, pursuant to the terms previously offered by the district attorney's office." The judge nodded gravely. "Very well. We'll schedule the formal plea and sentencing for next week." He looked directly at Victoria. "Until then, the defendant will remain in custody." As Victoria was led away by court officers, she finally turned to look at the family seated in the gallery. For a brief moment, her eyes locked with Marianne's across the courtroom, the woman who had everything stolen from her facing the woman who had orchestrated the theft. Then the moment passed, and Victoria disappeared through the door to the holding cells. Outside on the courthouse steps, reporters again swarmed the family, but this time Richard stepped forward to make a brief statement. "Today, justice began to be served," he said simply. "But no court ruling can restore the 16 years that were stolen from us. We ask for privacy as we begin to rebuild our lives together." As they descended the steps toward their waiting car, Marianne leaned close to Claire. "Is it really over?" she asked softly. Claire squeezed her mother's hand. "The worst part is, now we can focus on healing." Behind them, Isabel slipped her hand into Richard's, a gesture that spoke volumes about the bond slowly forming between father and daughter. The road ahead would not be easy. There were still wounds to heal, relationships to build, years of absence to bridge. But for the first time since this journey began, the path forward seemed clear of shadows. 2 months after Victoria's sentencing, 35 years without possibility of parole for the next 20, a gentle sea breeze swept through the open windows of a beach house in Santa Barbara. The California sun cast golden light across the weathered wooden floors, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny constellations. Marianne Dawson stood at the kitchen counter, slicing fresh strawberries. The simple act still felt miraculous sometimes. Using a knife, moving freely, making choices about what to eat and when. After 16 years of having every moment controlled, even ordinary freedoms remained precious gifts. "Mom, do you need any help?" Claire asked, entering the kitchen with an armful of wildflowers gathered from the hillside behind the house. "I'm fine," Marianne replied with a smile. Her voice was stronger now, her movements more confident. 6 months of proper medical treatment, therapy, and nutrition had worked wonders, though she knew she would never fully reclaim the woman she had been before her abduction. Some wounds left permanent scars. "These are beautiful," Marianne said, touching the purple and yellow blooms as Claire arranged them in a vase. "They remind me of the ones that used to grow behind our old apartment." Claire's eyes lit up. "You remember that?" Marianne nodded. "More comes back each day. Dr. Bennett was right. It just takes time." After Victoria's guilty plea, Richard had purchased this secluded beach house as a sanctuary for their healing family, far from the media frenzy of New York. With its relentless coverage of the Hale Hotel scandal, they could begin rebuilding their lives in peace. The front door opened, and Richard entered, carrying grocery bags. "Success," he announced. "Found those fancy bread rolls you like, Marianne, and ice cream for later." The domesticity of the scene would have been unimaginable a year ago. Richard Hale, hotel magnate, doing grocery runs in faded jeans and a t-shirt, his silver-flecked hair tousled by the ocean breeze. "Isabel texted," he added, setting the bags on the counter. "Her flight landed. The driver should have her here by 3. Claire smiled, helping unpack the groceries. Did she say how her parents took the news? The question still felt awkward, referring to the Carters as Isabel's parents while Marianne and Richard stood right there. But they had all learned that healing required acknowledging complicated truths, not simplifying them. "She said it was difficult, but they understand," Richard replied. "They know this is important for her." Isabel had spent the past 2 months primarily in Boston, finishing her school year and processing everything with her adoptive parents and a therapist specializing in family trauma. Today marked her first extended stay at the beach house, a 2-week visit before school resumed in the fall. "I made up her room with the blue bedding she liked from last time," Marianne said, a hint of nervousness in her voice. She still struggled sometimes with how to mother a teenage daughter she had lost as an infant, wanting to connect, but afraid of overstepping. Richard squeezed her shoulder gently. "She's going to love it." As they prepared lunch together, Claire marveled at how far they had come. The first weeks after Victoria's arrest had been chaos. Legal proceedings, medical treatments for Marianne, media intrusions, and the delicate navigation of Isabel's place in their newly reconnected family. There had been awkward silences, emotional outbursts, moments when the weight of 16 lost years seemed too heavy to bear. But gradually, day by day, they had begun learning how to be a family. Isabel arrived precisely at 3, stepping out of the black SUV with a teenager's studied casualness that couldn't quite mask her nervous energy. "Hey," she said, accepting hugs from Claire and Richard before turning to Marianne. There was still a moment of hesitation before Marianne embraced her, a split second where 16 years of absence hung between them like an invisible curtain. But then Isabel leaned in, wrapping her arms around the woman who had carried her, whose blood ran in her veins, whose absence had shaped her existence in ways she was only beginning to understand. "I missed you," Isabel whispered. Something in Marianne's expression softened, a tension she had carried since their reunion finally beginning to release. "I missed you too, sweetheart," every single day. They spent the afternoon walking along the beach, catching up on the past 2 months. Isabel had dyed blue streaks in her dark hair. Mom freaked, but Dad thought it was cool, and had started researching colleges with strong journalism programs. "I want to tell stories that matter," she explained, as they collected shells at the water's edge. "Stories about people who don't have a voice." Claire nodded, understanding completely. Their family's story had shown them the power of bringing hidden truths to light. As sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, they gathered on the deck for dinner. Richard uncorked a bottle of champagne, pouring small glasses for everyone, including Isabel. "Just this once," he said with a wink. "Special occasion." "What are we celebrating?" Isabel asked. Accepting the glass cautiously, Richard's expression grew serious. "I have some news to share with all of you. I've made a decision about Hale International." Claire and Marianne exchanged concerned glances. The scandal had damaged the company's reputation. With stock prices dropping nearly 30% after Victoria's arrest, Richard had spent months working to stabilize the business while simultaneously supporting their family's healing process. "I'm selling the company," he announced. "What?" Claire gasped. "But you've spent your whole life building it." Richard shook his head. Not my whole life, just the parts I remember. He looked at Marianne, his eyes softening. I lost 16 years to Victoria's deception. We all did. I don't want to spend whatever time I have left chained to a legacy that's tainted by her actions. But what will you do? Isabel asked. Richard smiled. I'm starting something new. A foundation focused on missing persons cases and supporting victims of wrongful institutionalization, using what happened to our family to help others find their way home. The Marianne Dawson Foundation, he added, looking at the woman he had lost and found again. If that's all right with you. Marianne's eyes filled with tears. It's perfect, she whispered. Richard raised his glass. To new beginnings. To family, Claire added. To finding our way home, Marianne said softly. They clinked glasses as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long golden rays across the water. Later that evening, as Isabel and Claire walked along the moonlit beach, sharing stories and getting to know each other as sisters, Richard found Marianne standing alone on the deck, gazing at the stars. Penny for your thoughts, he said, joining her at the railing. She smiled, the expression transforming her face into a glimpse of the woman he had fallen in love with so long ago. I was thinking about forgiveness. Victoria, he asked. Surprised, Marianne shook her head. No, not yet. Maybe not ever. She turned to face him. I was thinking about forgiving ourselves, for the choices we made, for the time we lost, for the guilt we've carried. Richard nodded slowly. That's the hardest kind of forgiveness, but necessary, she replied. If we want to move forward. He took her hand gently. Since her return, they had navigated a careful relationship, close but undefined, weighted with history, but cautious about the future. I never stopped loving you, he said quietly. Even when I thought you had left me. Marianne squeezed his hand. Love survived everything Victoria did to destroy it. That's something, isn't it? Inside the house, Claire watched them from the living room window, a bittersweet smile on her face. She had spent 16 years wondering what had happened to her mother, imagining countless scenarios, none of them close to the terrible truth. Now, against all odds, her family was whole again, different than it would have been, marked by trauma and loss, but whole. Nonetheless, she turned as Isabel came downstairs, camera in hand. Want to see the pictures I took today? They settled on the sofa, flipping through images of waves and seagulls, family members caught in candid moments, Richard laughing, Marianne with her face tilted toward the sun, Claire building a sandcastle like she was 11 years old again. The last photo made Claire pause. It showed the four of them together, gathered around the dinner table, illuminated by the golden light of sunset. Despite everything, the years of separation, the pain, the ongoing process of healing, they looked like a family, imperfect, wounded, but finding their way back to each other. That's my favorite, Isabel said softly. Claire nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Outside, Richard carefully placed a photograph in a new frame on the small table between the deck chairs. The same photograph that had started everything, Marianne in her blue dress, smiling despite the sadness in her eyes. Not a reminder of pain anymore, he said, echoing words from her therapy sessions. No, Marianne agreed, leaning against his shoulder as they gazed at the stars reflecting on the endless ocean. Now it's the beginning of everything, and for the first time in 16 years, the past loosened its grip, making room for the light of new possibilities, new connections, new beginnings. The pain would never fully disappear. The lost years could never be reclaimed. But here, now, surrounded by the family that fate, resilience, and love had somehow restored, they had found something many never achieve even in the most ordinary of lives. They had found their way home.